Good morning, televiewers of Media Prime Television. Thank you so much for joining us once again this morning, Monday morning, on a fresh edition of The Brief, your favorite bilingual program, which is always dedicated to the review of striking headlines in the papers on this platform. We dig several layers beneath the major headlines as captured by newspapers in the country. On today's edition of the program, I'm going to be doing it alone as my co-presenter, Gladys Ngina, is unavoidably absent this morning. She's been called up for other duties. And of course, the papers this morning are focusing on the 40th anniversary of President Paul Biya's ascension to power, as well as the seizure of Baba Dampolo's assets in South Africa, not leaving out the laying of foundation stone of Bamenda gas plant that was done over the weekend over there in Bamenda, chief town of the northwest region of the country. These are the three major headlines that we shall be digging several layers beneath with our resource person who is already joining us on the line to South Africa. I begin this morning with the Herald Tribune newspaper. The Herald Tribune this morning is interested in the faces of those that are supposedly behind the seizure of Baba Dampolo's assets in South Africa. Xenophobic attack. Here are the faces behind the seizure of Baba Dampolo's assets in South Africa. Get full details of that story on page 12 of this edition of the Herald Tribune newspaper that you can find on newspapers kiosk this morning in the country. 40th anniversary of President Paul Biya's 40 years at Helm of State. Messages of goodwill from Chief Banjon Bahai, who is the chief of Monkan village in the northwest region of the country. His Majesty Justice Achia as well, not leaving out Honorable Njingu Musa. All these are the faces of the people who wished President Paul Biya 40th anniversary, or the messages they sent to President Paul Biya on the occasion of that celebration which took place yesterday, the 6th day of November 2022 across the national territory. And we talk about this other headline that has to do with the construction of gas plant in Bamenda. Construction of gas plant begins in earnest as foundation stone laid at last. The Minister of Water and Energy Resources, Gaston Elondo Esomba, was there, and he revealed during the laying of the foundation stone of that gas plant that after construction, the population of Bamenda will no longer have the problem of scarcity of domestic cooking gas as well as its environs. Get full details in this edition of the Herald Tribune newspaper. We take you now to the Guardian Post. The Guardian Post newspaper this morning is interested in the military raid that took place in Meme division of the southwest region. Military kills Amba General in Ikindi. Soldiers of the 21st Military Support Battalion in the early hours of Thursday, November 3, killed an Amba General known by General, or the name goes by General Gideon. General Gideon, who was causing havoc in that community, was reportedly killed by soldiers of that unit of the army. The Amba Kingpin was killed in Ikindi, Meme division of the southwest region of the country. The operation by soldiers was conducted by the commander of the 21st Military Support Battalion in that part of the country. Get full details on page 4 of this edition of the Guardian Post newspaper. And the Guardian Post is focusing this morning when it comes to the 40th anniversary of President Paul Biya's ascension to power, is focusing on how militants of the ruling CPDM celebrated that anniversary in Santa subdivision in the northwest region of the country. Get full details of the celebration in Santa in this edition of the Guardian Post newspaper. Let's talk about the laying of foundation stone of Bamenda gas plant. Minister says Bamenda plant will address cooking gas shortage and price hikes in the country. The Minister of Water and Energy Resources, Gaston Elondo Esomba, has said the Bamenda liquefied petroleum gas plant will solve cooking gas shortages and price hikes in the northwest region of the country. He was speaking during the laying of the foundation stone over the weekend in Bamenda, chief town of the northwest region. We take you to Newswatch. Newswatch newspaper this morning is interested in the action of Samuel Eto'o when it comes to the sports wear of the indomitable Lions of the country. Defiant Eto'o launches Lions new kits despite court ruling in favor of Lecoq Sportif, the former equipment supplier to the indomitable Lions of the country. Samuel Eto'o was in Douala where he made the first purchase. Shortly after him, so many other personalities went buying their own jersey that the indomitable Lions will wear in Qatar during this the World Cup this year in Qatar. Let's talk about the celebration of the 40th anniversary of President Paul Biya ascension to power, November 6, 1982 to November 6, 2022. Biya clocks 40 at helm of state with checkered balance sheet. Get full details of the President Paul Biya's 40th anniversary of 40 years at the helm of state in this edition of News Watch newspaper. We talk about these utterances of renowned lawyer Barrister Akere Mona, who has vowed to expose officials bribed by Glencoe. Barrister Mona was speaking shortly after the sentencing of those officials of Glencoe Company Limited that is alleged to have bribed officials in Cameroon to get a contract. Full details in this edition of News Watch newspaper. We now take you to the Post. The Post newspaper this morning is interested in this exclusive interview granted the Post newspaper by Abdul Karim. Abdul Karim, who has been moved to the set or the National Secretariat for National Gendarmerie in Yaoundé, where is being detained. He is being detained now. Says every Anglophone is a nail if government believes solution is a hammer. We are told by the paper that an Anglophone pacifist and Muslim scholar, Abdul Karim Ali, has declared that if the Yaoundé regime believes that the only solution to the raging socio-political crisis rocking the northwest and southwest regions is the use of a hammer, then every Anglophone is a nail. He spoke to the Post newspaper briefly over the weekend, barely after 2 days following his transfer from Bamenda in the northwest region to Yaoundé at the National Gendarmerie headquarters, where he's being detained, as per what the paper is telling us. And Abdul Karim disclosed that he was spending the 86th day of arbitrary arrest and a detention that is 84 days in Bamenda and 2 days in Yaoundé. Get full details of the outing of Abdul Karim in this edition of the Post newspaper. And the Post is also interested in the 40th anniversary of President Paul Biya. And this time around, we are focusing on the message of CDC GM Franklin Jie, who calls for unity. And this was during the celebration in Limbe, chief town of Fako division of the southwest region of the country. We end with the Horizon. The Horizon newspaper is interested in the celebration of the 20th or the 40th anniversary of President Paul Biya's ascension to power. This time around, the paper is focusing on the celebration in Mezamtu, that's Santa. Get full details on how the celebration unfolded in that part of the country in this edition of the Horizon newspaper. Thank you for watching, televiewers on My Media Prime. We are back in the studio to continue with our discussions this morning, and we are going straight to South Africa to meet our resource person, Dr. John Asong, who is already joining us on the line to South Africa. Good morning, Doctor, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Mr. Lasha Kingsley. Thank you for inviting me to the program.
You're welcome, sir. The pleasure is equally shared. And let's begin with what the Herald Tribune newspaper is telling us this morning, bringing to us the faces of some individuals believed to be behind the seizure of Baba Dampolo's assets in South Africa. You are based in South Africa. What was your own finding of what is happening to Baba Dampolo in South Africa?
Well, the seizure of Baba Dampolo's property, I have not got much information about it. But then I think the problem needs to be properly investigated. I know most globally or out there, everyone is talking of xenophobic attack. He's a victim of xenophobia. It could be that he is a victim of xenophobia, but as an individual, based on what I see in the ground, is that most of the time, some other Africans, when we migrate into South Africa, especially when they start doing businesses, you might realize that the registration processes were not duly completed. And in some cases, they had to manipulate their way to get certain documents like the tax clearance and all of that. And so when the Department of, when the South African Revenue Service start conducting their routine checks, and they realize that you are having, or your company, your businesses were not properly registered, or the documents which you have, the registration documents, did not follow the proper process, what the legal system will do will be to put everything on hold and follow procedural investigations to make sure that they are not doing the wrong thing. So probably I think he might have found himself in that situation, especially in cases where you sit in Cameroon and you have trusted brothers or relatives or other business accomplices in South Africa to process registration for you. They might just go through the back door and get those documents.
We are talking about assets worth 500 billion francs CFA, shopping malls, other hotels, and so many other assets were seized. I mean, they were auctioned, let me put it that way, auctioned and taken for him not being able to refund the loan he obtained from a certain bank in South Africa. We are not talking about following due procedure. We are talking about loans he obtained as per what we are reading in the papers. And the manager of a certain bank, the bank which I will not call the name, is reportedly behind the move to see Baba Dampolo's assets seized in South Africa.
Yes, Mr. Kingsley, I think the question we should be asking here is, was he given enough time by the bank to repay the loans? Did he keep to his own agreement? So Baba himself had to tell well if he honored his own agreement of paying back the loan. So there might be a breach of loan payment. That is why the bank would have seized his property and auctioned them. So I think in this case here, Baba himself has to be the first responsible person to give us the right information, because as it stands now, any form of investigation to protect or to check what happened, the bank will be playing wise. So if Baba has evidence that he paid his loans and didn't breach any agreement, I think Baba has a right to follow the legal channel and the bank will repay him back. But if at all he sits and allow everything to be taken and sold based on the loan that he took, then there should be a problem with the loan payment process. I, for one, have been also in the loan situation, but you have a process to pay and you have to notify the bank in time if you are having issues with repaying the loans and the loan amount be readjusted. So Baba found himself in one of these situations. So I don't work with the bank. I don't speak from an onlooker's account.
Okay, let's come back to Cameroon to talk about the anniversary, or the 40th anniversary of President Paul Biya's ascension to power. Yesterday, Cameroonians from across the north, south, east, west, they celebrated President Paul Biya's ascension, or being in power for over 40 years. And even abroad, I'm sure in South Africa, militants of the ruling CPDM equally celebrated President Paul Biya. Is there really something or anything to be celebrated in these 40 years of President Paul Biya being at the helm of state? What is your own reading of President Paul Biya's stay in power? Achievements, when you weigh achievements and what he still needs to be done, how do you rate the government?
Well, I think President Paul Biya came to power when I was about 9 years of age. Back there in our little town in Trikona, Ikombebonji, was a celebration. The first thing I want to say here is people who have benefited from the government will always celebrate. It's like you are celebrating your normal birthday. Whether it's good or it's bad, you still have to celebrate. But as an individual looking at 40 years of Mr. Biya's administration, there is very little I can write home about. Yes, here and there we've got some infrastructure development in certain cities, but this development has not gone throughout the whole country.
That's what I
So
just
to
wanted.
me,
I want us to go sector by sector so that probably we don't mix things here. Let's start with security, yes, and the promotion of national unity and territorial integrity. Let's evaluate President Paul Biya on that before we go into other, or we get into other aspects of President Paul Biya's stay in power for over 40 years. Let's begin with the consolidation of national unity and territorial integrity. How do you score President Paul Biya in that domain?
With the consolidation of national unity, I will score President Paul Biya less than 40%.
Okay.
Yes, I will score him less than 40%. The national unity which we expect to see in our Africa in miniature, it's not manifesting itself. Of recent, we have lots and lots of crises. The territorial integrity of the country is at stake. The Anglophone problem, in East Cameroon, there are uprising. In the North Cameroon, there are uprising. And these are not issues that just came up now. These are issues that have been boiling in the pipeline, and the government, the administration failed to address it. And now they have manifested themselves through the barrel of the gun and the insurgents. So on national unity, he has been a very good speaker of national unity, but I think little has been done to manifest that national unity. Instead, there is much more of separation between the different spheres of the country.
No, okay. Let's look at. But when you look at the victory over Bakassi Peninsula, and up to today that we speak, not even an inch of the territory has been lost to Boko Haram up north. Don't you think that is a very big achievement for President Paul and Cameroon as
yes,
well?
that is a good achievement for him, and that forms part of his 40%. In the north, nothing has been lost to Boko Haram. With the Bakassi Peninsula, through the help of the Green Tree Accord and his diplomacy, we were able to keep Bakassi Peninsula. And I think for me, that is a success. And he's got a success of, I think, creating more divisions to bring power to the people, which is not really being manifested. That is some amount of success also. So that I put it under his 40%.
When you look at international diplomacy, how he relates with other countries?
Mr. Biya, I think in terms of his international diplomacy, one, I can't really speak much because Cameroon is one of those countries which is not much spoken of in the, especially with the communication. But Biya has been successful in his foreign policy in trying to get relationship with Cameroon and other big powers. That I can say he has tried as a politician, though he spends most of his time outside the country. But I think that in terms of that foreign policy, which he has got some successes, we don't see a reflection back into the country. Cameroon is still being visa restricted in so many countries. Getting documents out of the country for Cameroonians is not that easy. That also has to tell you that might some flag, I call it flag relationship, but it's not manifested in detail.
Who is to blame? Don't you think that the way Cameroonians present themselves is because of the way some Cameroonians act that present a very bad image to the countries that you are talking about? That is very difficult to get visas.
Yeah, I do accept that we've got some elements who present themselves very bad. But then, let me give you an example of South Africa. By 2003, I don't know who was Consulate General by then. You find a situation where Cameroonians were struggling to get access to documents, especially the asylum document, and the then Consulate did not protect the interests of Cameroonians, And so Cameroonians found it very difficult to get that document because of the information he had passed to the department at that time. But since then, there has been some progress. There has been much progress on that. But then, the government is still not doing much to protect that case. For example, take Nigeria. When there's an issue confronting Nigerians here, you will hear the Embassy of Nigeria or the High Commission speaking, and you will hear the government of Nigeria speaking on behalf of its citizens. You will hardly find Cameroon High Commission speaking on behalf of its citizens when they are faced with such challenges.
But we had a recent case.
I can't speak much about other countries in the world.
We had a recent case in neighboring Equatorial Guinea where the ambassador came out, President Pobia also came out, speaking on the case of Cameroonians in South Africa that were unjustly being sent back home, some allegedly thrown into the high sea.
Come again?
I'm talking about the case of Equatorial Guinea, where the consulate came out to talk about the situation of Cameroonians who were unjustly being sent back home. President Pobia also spoke. I'm talking in likes of what you just said a while ago, that when there are issues, you have the Nigerian government coming out to speak. We've seen the case of Equatorial Guinea with President Pobia speaking out.
I mean, speaking out in 1 out of 10, how can you rate it, Mr. Lasha? And of course, Equatorial Guinea is part of CEMAC. It's just one little bundle. So it's easier for him to speak about CEMAC. If you look at in terms of the culture and traditions, most of Cameroon, the southern part of Cameroon has a closer relationship with the Equatorial Guinea. So it's easier to speak when it comes to CEMAC, because Cameroon, of course, is the leader of CEMAC. Okay. And so as a bulldog, they have to speak. We are looking at other areas, other countries in the world where Cameroon is not a leader or is not in that sub-region.
Okay. Let's look at...
The reaction is very slow.
Let's look at the educational sector of the country. 40 years, have we achieved more? Has President Pobia achieved a lot?
Okay, 40 years, I think we can say there have been creation of some new state universities, as opposed to when there was only Ngwaikele in the days of the former predecessor. But I think in terms of education, Mr. Biya has achieved, though we still have crisis with the educational sector.
But the question will be what kind of universities has he created? You see, have so many youths leaving these 10 state universities and they are jobless. Many Cameroonians want to know, you say he has achieved more in that.
I think,
yes.
The achievement I'm talking here is just about signing into place those universities. Yes. But there is still lack of people in those universities are not fully equipped. The kind of programs that are being run are programs that are addressing the issues of the economy of the country. Here and there, at University of Boya or University of Yaoundé, being on top, I think in most cases, those rankings come in terms of publications. But when you look at the output of the university and the economy of the country, because the university is supposed to be a feeder to the state, address the issues of the state will be addressed in the university, and we have experts being produced who are able to match the job environment. That, for me, with Cameroon and under Paul Biya's administration, is still lacking. We used to have former technical high schools in Cameroon, like in the southwest region and west, Vocas and the rest, which are no longer functioning for reasons we don't know. Things like the Technicon, that is supposed to train a lot of engineers, we don't have much of that in Cameroon. We have more of general education, which of course is not doing enough. It's not doing enough to tailor or to handle the issues of the country. We need infrastructure development. We need technicons of engineering, schools of electrical engineering, and all of that. That is what we need. We need more medical schools by the state, not only QS alone. He was supposed to have opened more medical universities. At least each province should have a medical university.
We have one in Buea.
Each province should have a technical university.
In Bamenda, University of Buea runs a faculty of health science with medical doctors are equally trained in Buea and Bamenda. Let's now look at the health sector of Cameroon. 40 years with President Paul Biya. Has much changed?
Father, for 40 years of Mr. Biya in the health sector, I would say there he has scored zero. There's a complete degeneration of the health sector. Complete degeneration of the health sector. I can't read Mr. Biya in the health sector as an individual. A lot of patients dying in hospitals, hospitals not fully equipped, specialists are not there. Even hospitals that used to be well equipped in the past, all that infrastructure has deteriorated. And I don't want to believe that it's only those who were put in place, but the whole management system was not actually performing.
But we have other
all the hospitals I know.
We have other
provincial hospitals are no longer operating the way I grew up. I spent most of my time in Bamenda while growing up. The Bamenda Provincial Hospital is not what we used to know in the 80s and in the 90s. So it's completely down. I think what is helping Cameroon now is more of the mission hospitals.
Okay. What about the construction of these hospitals by Chinese, the gynecobstetric hospitals, one in Douala, another one in Yaoundé, and even the general hospitals with PM that just inaugurated the Garoua General Hospital recently with the state-of-the-art infrastructure? You still rate President Paul Biya like zero on that?
No, there's a state-of-the-art infrastructure there. And are we sure that infrastructure will be maintained across the board? And one thing that worries me is that Cameroon at this state in this new millennium, are Cameroonians not capable of constructing that infrastructure? Why must we go over to China? If the government had prioritized technical education, technicons being created, all those hospitals would have been created by Cameroonians themselves. We have the potentials. If you go out of the country, Cameroonians are doing quite great. And if there was an enabling environment for them to operate, that should be built by Cameroonians, not by Chinese. Yes, he has done a good job there, but maintenance is going to be the problem. Building a house is one thing, maintaining the house is one thing, for the house to be productive is another.
Okay.
We have seen several state-of-the-art infrastructure built in Cameroon, but a few years along the line, it becomes a place where goats are sleeping in.
Let's look at democracy now.
So let's say he has done a good job there, but let's see how there will be maintenance.
Let's look at democracy. He's often referred to as father of democracy in Cameroon. When you look at, let's talk liberty, freedom of speech, if you have to compare President Paul Biya since he took over from Ahidjo, compare Ahidjo era and the era of President Paul Biya when it comes to democracy, freedom of speech, how would you rate President Paul Biya in that domain?
Okay, in terms of democracy, the first thing I'll have to say here is Ahidjo's era, I can only say from what I read from books. I mean, if Biya came to power when I was 9 years old, it therefore tells you I knew little or nothing about Ahidjo's administration. But based on what we read from books, Biya has done a good thing by introducing democracy to the country, freedom of speech. I think all of that is highly theoretical. But when it comes to the practical aspect of it, there is still press censorship, which means freedom of expression is not fully guaranteed. Here and there, people can move to the street and say whatever they want to say. But we've also had situations where such people, they disappear in thin air. Yes, he's the father of democracy. He brought democracy, but I think it's an iron hand democracy. Elections are not yet transparent. We don't see free and fair elections. So that means he brought democracy, yet the practice of democracy is still a nightmare to Cameroon.
Okay,
so we can appreciate him for the fact that he introduced democracy. And I don't really think we need to give him much appreciation, because it was a wind of change that was blowing through Africa in the early 90s. And so Cameroon found himself caught up in the wind of democracy. And there's nothing he could sit back and to say, I won't also go in for that, or multipartism. So it was the wind of change blowing through the continent.
What do you have to say? Some people think that the democracy we are talking about is even disorder that was brought to, there is no real opposition in Cameroon. We have over 300 plus political parties existing in Cameroon, but none has not been able to remove Mr. Biya from power.
Mr. Kingsley, with Cameroon, it's not the number of political parties that are needed to uproot the president from power or the ruling party. The problem with Cameroon, one, the electoral laws are not in good condition. That's the first thing. Number two, among those 300 parties, so many are satellites to the ruling party. I witnessed in the case of 1991 when we had the first multi-party parliamentary elections. There were a lot of parties who finally deviated, crossed the carpet, and went to join the CPDM. So most of those parties that are out there in Cameroon are still part of the CPDM. And worse still, you find that some of the parties are within a certain division. A man from a certain division has a political party that it sits only in the BLM or in FACO or in Nolinga. I don't call those political parties. Those are not political parties for me, because they are just there for the interest of a particular area, not for the whole country. So we can have as many as they are. Okay. But so long as the electoral laws are not in place, it is difficult to unseat Mr. Biya's administration. He controls the election. The electorate is said to be free and fair. It is not free and fair. We remember some years ago when the Professor Augustine Concho Komini was the Minister of State in charge of communication and spokesman of the government. He practically gave the result of an election before the election, and the polls reflected what he said. So you can see that the ruling party has got a very good machine of rigging elections. So it's difficult to unseat them.
So why are the opposition party or Cameroonians not strategizing on counteracting the system that has been put in place, that we talk about rigging of elections? You sit and you watch the system continue rigging elections?
If we come to that, there is one thing I find a little bit frustrating with my country, with the politicians. It's difficult for the politicians to have an alliance, of an opposition alliance. And I think that has got to deal with the leadership of the party. And that is greed. Because I remember when there was Union for Change, and suddenly Union for Change collapsed because it was not either Mr. Frundi to be the head or late Awungnjia Tamnjong to be the head or whatsoever. So in that space also, our political parties are also failing the people. They are more on their own interests rather than the interests of the country. That is why it's difficult for them to form alliances, a stable and functional alliance that can unseat the ruling government. So in an atmosphere like that, even you were to be in Mr. Biya's shoes, you will be able to manipulate your way and stay in power because the opposition is divided.
Okay. Let's talk about fighting corruption. Has Mr. Biya succeeded in bringing Cameroon, in fighting corruption that has become a cankerworm in Cameroon?
Mr. Biya, in terms of fighting corruption, he is good at speaking at it. But I think, one, he should start with himself. And when the corruption train, the anti-corruption train is moving, it should be moving around the whole country. Here and there, you find people being arrested coming from certain areas. Today, you hear somebody is arrested because he stole huge sums of money. The next day, he is a minister. I don't think that is fighting corruption. Of recent, if I can't remember the specific edition of the newspaper, we had issues where some members of cabinet who had stolen money were brought back and welcomed right at the Unity Palace with a very nice party. And people like Dr. George Ewane were being considered as spies. That tells you that the corruption is ethnic based. He's fighting it from certain areas. Maybe I would say he has a good opinion on that, but those he has put in place are actually failing him.
Okay.
That is a line that I cannot actually draw on.
Okay.
But his voice is not being heard in this corruption issue as the father of the nation. I think he has overgiven his voice, his power to his immediate collaborators who behind the scene are not doing the right job. So in terms of corruption, I think he has tried, but not up to 50%. Okay. Because Cameroon that I know, with the resources that we have, if we had 50% corruption addressed in Cameroon, I don't think anyone will want to travel out. That country will be a small heaven.
Okay. Doctor, we end this morning with this laying of foundation stone of the Bamenda gas plant by the Minister of Water and Energy Resources, Gaston Ilundo Esomba. He was in Bamenda, and he said that after the construction of this gas plant, the population of the entire Northwest and its environs will no longer have problem of gas shortage and price hikes.
That is a very good initiative, but the question I want to ask here is, why is it that in Cameroon we must always wait until when the problem has gone beyond the threshold before we start coming out with innovative solutions? That is the problem. And I just believe and wish that the laying of the foundation stone should not be like we used to hear of the laying of the foundation stone of Kumba Mondemba Road, which is still today unconstructed. So I just believe that this time the laying of the foundation stone will not take another 5 years before they start the construction work. Gas is a basic necessity that is needed to put food on the table. We have a gas reserve. This is something that the government would have exploited years, decades behind, providing job for the people, making access to life much easier. And when we can have a easy gas supply, there are other small businesses that are going to thrive because there is availability of gas, a source of energy. So it's a good idea, but then it's coming a little bit too late. And I'm scared that because of the need in time, the constructors might just rush onto it, hurriedly do it here and there, and then they tell you they are completed, and after a couple of months, the system is not longer working. And it's a good idea. Let's give him the support, but we wish that it should be done a state-of-the-art construction that will not only supply the people of Bamenda alone, because that gas reserve has a potential of supplying Cameroon. Cameroon can actually export gas from there to neighboring African countries who do not have that reserve. So it's a good initiative, but I think it needs closer dialogue, closer consultation with experts in the field to be able to have a good realization.
But it was said during the laying of foundation stone that it was a gift from President Paul Biya on the celebration, on that day of celebration of the 40th anniversary. Why should a developmental project be termed a gift from President Paul Biya?
I think the question you have asked me, you are already giving an answer. The people, development is a right of the people, of the citizenship of that country. It should not be a gift to the president. When people are saying that, I know those are people who are preparing to embezzle that funds. It should not be. Me and you, we deserve the right to that development as citizens of the country. The gas construction, the money is not coming from somebody's pocket. It is the taxpayer's money. And so the taxpayer deserves the right of that development. It shouldn't be a gift to the head of state. I think it should it should have been the other way around to say the president from his own personal pocket is constructing it to the people of Bamenda as a gift for his 40th anniversary. So you can't take the taxpayers' money to do development which is a right of the taxpayer and then you say it's a gift to a certain leader. No. That is it. I mean, those are cadres of Paul Biya who want to remain in power, who are lobbying for positions saying that.
Okay.
It can't be a gift to him.
And unfortunately on that day, the Minister of Water and Energy Resources was received in Bamenda with dry taps, power outage, and a lot more. Welcome the Minister of Water and Energy Resources. He was in Bamenda in darkness, and the taps were not flowing when he came to inaugurate or to lay the foundation stone of that gas plant.
I mean, one of the things that surprises me is Bamenda, the capital city of the Northwest region. The Northwest region is host to Menchum Falls, a fall that can supply hydropower to the continent of Africa, and yet they still experience electricity problems. And we have a government sitting in power, and there's a natural resource that the country is blessed with. Just to put machines on the ground is a problem. I think with the Minister of Energy Resources going to Bamenda and experiencing such a situation, should tell him that much has to be done. Much has to be done.
Thank you, Dr. John Asong.
And I think it was a good welcome for him.
Thank you so much, Dr. John Asong. Finally, we've come to the end of today's edition of the program. Thank you so much for your time. It should be recalled that you're a lecturer at a university in South Africa. You joined us this morning from South Africa for the very first time. Thank you for your time, sir.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Lasha, coming to your program, and I really appreciate the good work that your program is doing to educate Cameroonians. And I think from this side, we shall join you also with the Alele Lyon as they are going for the World Cup. We wish them well, and we want to see them pass the quarterfinals this time.
Thank you so much.
Have a blessed day, and to the National Triangle as well.
A blessed day to you, Doctor. Thank you to televiewers of my Media Prime for watching this edition of the program that I coordinated alone with the unavoidable absence of Gladys Bomotogina, my co-presenter. Tomorrow is another day. We all will be here for you. Do have a blessed week ahead. Bye-bye for now.